Good morning, Terraria players! I am BladeBurger, and it's time to review the mod I've been playing for the last 5 weeks, the Anarchist mod. For those who clicked here to see the review of this mod and haven't watched my 5-part playthrough series just yet, go watch them, it's a good mod. Don't forget to do this stuff that the algorithm likes, helps out this channel. Now without further ado, let's get into the review of the Anarchist mod for Terraria. What is the Anarchist mod? It's a pretty sizable content mod for Terraria that adds 11 bosses when I last counted, over 1,000 items, weapons, and equipment, numerous enemies, a few new NPCs, and a new class, the Dark Artist. The content extends right from the Eye of Cthulhu to beyond the Moon Lord, with new weapons and armor in every area of the game, even summoner stuff right from the get-go. In this playthrough that I will be basing the review off of, I played the new Dark Artist class. Let's talk about the new class to kick off the actual review portion of this review. What does the Dark Artist do? It plays with your life total a lot, with lifesteal and health regen being a pretty big theme of the class. Armor reduces your max life a lot of the time, while it either gives you a bump to health regen or just giving you lifesteal. This class also has a new resource to use, Arcturum. Certain weapons have an alt-fire mode that uses Arcturum. There's also a number of totem weapons that you can set down for a temporary AoE that damages enemies and buffs you. What are their weapons like? Like many mods, the Dark Artist has thrown weapons, but they also have the Dark Artist spells as well. A nice twist that I did like. Now that the class is explained, let's get into the pros and cons of this mod, starting with the cons. There's not many, and they're all pretty minor. They're more like minor gripes. I did really like this mod, but just enough to be mentioned in this. The first con is Arcturum. It's pretty useless. You have a lot of gear that increases your max Arcturum, but not a lot to actually use it for. You have a right-click attack that heals you a very small amount, or the totems, which last long enough for your Arcturum to fully regenerate between placing them. Running out of Arcturum means nothing, as the lifesteal alt-fire mode is only used during potion cooldown most of the time. Early pre-hard mode was really the only place that I actually ran out of Arcturum, as I couldn't heal with my weapon while my healing potion was cooling down. In late hard mode, you don't even need Arcturum. Endgame gear and weapons around, I would say around Plantera, just heal you straight up, so you don't need to right-click to alt-fire. Totems are not very good against bosses since the fights move around, but they're very good at farming, so Arcturum is pretty useless by around Primordius, as I would estimate. Again, definitely an exaggeration, but something to be noted. More uses for Arcturum in late hard mode would be nice to compensate for endgame gear just doing the weapons alt-fire healing job. The 100 additional Arcturum on Wicked Armor and up felt pretty useless. Enough about that, let's get on to the next very minor gripe. Lack of armor after Voidstone tier armor. When you get to the final 3 bosses after Moonlord, and the final 3 bosses of the mod, new armor just vanishes. You have the Voidstone armor and nothing else. Moonlord allows Twilight armor to be crafted, but only Voidic is after that. Frostron allows you to craft the Ice Pick, which gets you the armor itself. Anything from Frostron himself? Icy armor? Nah. Anything from Keozarith? He does drop bars, but those can't be crafted into armor. It was a bit underwhelming to have no armor upgrades from the final boss. However, a pro of this mod is that the Voidic armor is very strong. Very strong. I'll elaborate more as I get to the pros of this mod. On to the next minor gripe. The endgame weapon sprites are pretty boring. They're just green. Need some spice there. They aren't splashy or interesting looking. I'm hoping they're temporary sprites, cause man, they're boring. No offense to the spriter of this mod, cause the rest of this mod's sprites are fire. Just not these for endgame weapons. On to the next minor gripe. Pre-hard mode Dark Artist armor is just not as good as base vanilla armor until Lucifer armor. This sentence says it all, honestly. Grim armor was very poor compared to armor that I had access to at the same time. I was better off using vanilla gear until I was able to get the Lucifer armor. The next con is the expert mode exclusive items. As I always love expert mode, sometimes the expert mode drops are very welcome. These were very underwhelming. I think I only used one of the expert mode drops throughout the entire run, and it was only good against the mech bosses, as it did an additional 10% of damage, but then when it's against mechanical enemies it did an extra 10. But that's about it for the minor gripes of this mod. On to the pros. Small side note, not really a con, but just a note. Cross-compatibility with other stable mods just isn't a thing currently for the Anarchist mod. Not compatible with Alchemist NPC, Vein Miner, Farger's Mutant, and a few other staple mods. The mod does compensate for the lack of purchasable boss summons, however, as I'll speak about in the pros. Now let's get to it. The diversity of Dark Artist weaponry is very good. A lot of this is my experience before the Cosmic series of weapons was added to the mod, but the spread of Dark Artist throwing weapons and Dark Artist spells was very well done. I swapped a lot from the throwing to spells throughout the mod, but ended at a spell because magic is cool. This was before a ton of the early game spells and throwing weapons were added, however, so my experience may be different now that they've been added. My playthrough started at 1.1.1.2, and these look to be added in 1.1.3.2. You can go all spell or all throwing weapon. It's pretty nice. Normally a mod would only do one or the other, so having both is very good. Is there a possibility of armor to be added that allows more specifications? Like a helmet for the Wicked Armor that specializes in the spells versus the throwing weapons. It would be neat. The weapons themselves are also well spread throughout the game. You have many weapons pre-hard mode, and even more dispersed throughout progression that all leads to the Cosmic Wrath or Cosmic Shuriken for Dark Artists, and 2 more Cosmic weapons for other classes, with actually 3 for melee, cause yo-yos. Every single boss is used, and has a drop associated with them. I skipped Queen Bee though, I hate that boss. On to the next pro of the mod. The speed. God damn, this mod schmooved. It felt very good to be able to move so fast and be able to hit speeds that other mods are jealous of. The speed crystals, because I forgot the name, that are available pre-hard mode are a great addition to introduce the player to how fast this mod goes. They're very easily accessible, being crafted from very common items in this mod. Another great thing about the speed the player is given is that it allows bosses to move fast too. The fights near the end felt very much like anime, with each character moving rapidly to dodge attacks and weave around the other, almost like a fast-paced dance with lasers and swords. If there is one thing that I would love to stay a constant theme for later updates of this mod, it's the speed increases that it gives to the player and the enemies. 2 minor downsides to this. My house was not built to handle the speed, and that it's very difficult to start new playthroughs because of the way I get used to how insanely fast I move by the end of this mod. Love it. Let's get on to the next pro. The Dark Artist class in general. The armor was awesome and very creative. Lowering max life is something a mod really doesn't do a lot, so it's interesting to see it done here. It compensated for that by allowing lifesteal, a mechanic a ton of mods also shy away from with the exception of vampire knife upgrades and stuff. The mechanic was also balanced by either costing Arcturum in early game, or just having late game bosses be able to BTFO you if you can't dodge or weren't prepared, like me versus Kenny. The added helms to the hard mode ores are also a very nice addition, as it made those bars more important and useful to you if you play Dark Artist or Summon. All 3 tiers of hard mode ore had a class helmet for Dark Artist and Summoner. The only real balancing problem I saw was the crosscut. It felt simply too powerful against the wall of flesh. The health regen buff procced a bit too much and gave too good of a benefit. Otherwise, the class fit right in with the other vanilla classes and the support this mod gave. No idea if the crosscut has changed since I killed the wall of flesh. I'll have to replay later to get full scale balance. But I didn't feel too overpowered until the endgame, where I'm supposed to feel overpowered. Love the class, glad I played it. The next big pro, the pure class system. Essentially, it works like this. In the starter bag for this mod, there are tokens for each class. Using the token locks you into a pure class, reducing all damage by other classes to near 0 damage and giving class-specific buffs on armor and equipment. Irreversible as far as I'm aware, except for a dev item I haven't tested. I do like how it taunts you. Good humor. The buffs that pure classes are given are relatively strong. Pure Dark Artists get the ability to self-res on hard mode armor. I don't know what the other classes get, but hopefully they're as strong as this. Any pure class gets buffs on a lot of endgame equipment as well. The only issue with this mechanic, however, is that the exclusive class buffs aren't prevalent enough. They almost didn't exist at all pretty much pre-hard mode, and were only big in later armor sets around Moonlord. Other than that, I did like the class locking system. Made your choice in classes matter more than most mods. Now, on to the next pro. Farming bosses is actually important and rewarding. The Pages to the Exceedingly Dangerous Beings volumes makes it very worth farming the bosses a lot. Each page for a boss drops with a pretty decent chance to it, and it can all be combined into a nice buff to all stats that just works in the inventory. I like that a lot. To compensate for the pain of having to fight them a lot, the mod allows you to craft eternal summons, which allow you to have a non-consumable summon item. A very good thing to have, which many mods, including the top dog Calamity, suffer from a lack of until later on. The Eternal Summon items are very welcome. The modded bosses also drop a lot of money, with the first post-Moonlord boss dropping 8 platinum coins. It makes it even more worth it to farm them for a lot of moolah for endgamer forges. I usually dread refights and try to stay away from them, but this mod made them worth it. Now, on to the next pro. The humor. I enjoyed the humor of this mod. 2 bosses that are literally giant noses was a funny surprise I didn't expect, and I'm glad they exist. The dev item that reverses pure classes also taunts the player, which I found funny. Keep up the humor, I like it. Now that the big pros and cons are out of the way, now let's go through each of the bosses, what's good and bad about them. They will all be done in an order of progression. There are 11 new modded bosses when I last counted, so I could be missing one, assuming I forgot. I'll do a scale of 1 to 10, with 5 being just average, 1 being horrible, and 10 being amazing. Let's begin with the Nose of Cthulhu. The Nose is not a hard boss. Its summon item drops from the Eye of Cthulhu itself, so it's able to be fought very quickly after killing the eye. The boss wasn't too interesting mechanic-wise, just chased you and shot boogers. It's the design itself that makes this boss a good one. That, and the items that drop from itself for a very high gold amount. The music of this boss was also very amusing. I liked it. Now Bissu, please put the music on YouTube. I get the music created too. Good to farm. I give this boss a 6 out of 10, with a lot of the points given to its farmability and design. Next in progression is the Frost Sail. This boss is meh. Its attacks are pretty slow and easy to dodge if you actually focus. The looks and aesthetic is neat, and I'm glad it's an early snow biome boss, but there's no music, strangely. Not even vanilla music, just straight up no music in my playthrough. I have no idea if some was added later, as I didn't refight it much. My refights to farm later on were done when I was listening to my metal playlist on my phone. One big thing that actually hurts my score for this boss is the hard to see projectiles it emits when it does a certain attack. The loot seems good, and it drops multiple components for the Frankenstein doll, of very good equipment, so it's worth a farm. But the fight isn't very enjoyable. Solid 4 out of 10. Next is the Corrupt Spirit. This boss isn't too bad either in terms of difficulty. I almost lost due to lack of buffs, but with buffs it would have been even easier. Its attacks vary in terms of how telegraphed they are, with its charge attack being very easily to see coming, and its jaw attack being very hard to telegraph. The design of the boss is good, however the jaw attack doesn't really seem to fit its overall aesthetic. Its music is pretty nice too, very chill. Its loot is pretty bad to be honest. It drops the totem equipment for expert mode that buffs melee only. I give it a 6.5 out of 10, as I don't feel as though it gets a 7, but it's better than a 6. This is my tier list, I get to cheat on it. On to the next boss. The Crimson Stalker was my favorite of the 2 post-Skeletron biome bosses. Its attacks were a lot more fun to fight against than the Spirit. The mechanic of summoning enemies did get a bit annoying, but was not very bad if you controlled the minions. It had no original music, so I have no opinion on that. The loot was definitely better than the Corrupt Spirits, but as my con from earlier listed, it's not strong enough to use. Overall, 7 out of 10. I like the boss. Next, the first hard mode boss, the Prototype. This boss is a very good one. It definitely fit right into the mech boss stage of progression, with its attacks being pretty similar, but still unique when compared to the mech bosses. The music to this boss was also good. It's no calamity, but it's still an enjoyable song. The loot from this boss is also great. The expert mode drop is one of the few that I actually used for a bit, as it helped me to take on the other 4 mech bosses. Other 4? Surely there's only 3. Well, wait until I talk about the next boss. Prototype also dropped Empty Souls, which allowed you to combine it with other souls to almost duplicate, air quotes, them. Helped out later in the mod when I didn't want to grind for Souls of Flight and Frost. I won't give it a perfect score, as its immune phase was really obnoxious. It sucked a lot when I was farming it for its page when I was able to erase its health in 3 seconds, but was forced to wait about 15 seconds to finish it off because of that phase. I give the Prototype an 8 out of 10. Very nice boss. Next up is Schnoz. 10 out of 10. Big metal nose. Jokes aside, this boss is very similar to the original Nose of Cthulhu, just faster and dealt an annoying debuff. Its bossy music was much funnier and much more enjoyable than its younger brother, so it balances out that it's a less enjoyable fight of the 2. Did it have good loot? Its upgraded booger can track now, so it was pretty strong actually. Overall, still a 6 out of 10. Mechanically uninteresting, but aesthetically amazing. On to the next one. Primordius. Honestly, my favorite boss of this mod. Despite it being a slime boss, like every mod does, it had a very good twist to it. Its summon move and raining spears made you really schmoove around this fight. Was it hard? Nah, not really. Was it fun? Very fun. Its boss music was also really great, only beaten by a boss later in this mod. The loot from Primordius was very strong. It had a full armor set that could be crafted from it, and the armor set for Dark Artist was extremely strong. The totem it dropped from its loot pool was a massive upgrade for myself, as I didn't get the totem from the hollow at that stage of progression. It helped a lot with dungeon farming. Overall, a 10 out of 10. I liked it too much to dock a point for how easy it was. The next boss to rate is the Overseer, the final boss before Moonlord. Good boss, bad loot. The attacks were very well telegraphed, which is a big plus for this mod as a whole, except for Frostron. Unique attacks, decent challenge, nice music. Where does this boss go wrong? The loot. It's horrible. The weapons felt very underpowered versus the weapon I had at this stage in progression, and the expert mode drops felt useless. Prevent damage down to 20 once every 45 seconds essentially didn't matter in a boss fight, where 45 seconds is an eternity. Not enough of a big or splashy effect. I give this boss an 8 out of 10, mostly because it's a cool boss. The loot does drag it down a bit. Now we're on the current post-Moonlord bosses, all of which are excellent. First up is the Void. If the only downside to this boss is the bland sprite and the disorienting attack, this has gotta be a pretty good boss. The boss music is a banger too. Very enjoyable, my favorite boss music of this mod. Whoever made this music or knows the artist behind it, please give me the sauce. Its attacks were all unique and its loot was very good. What could be made from its drops were top tier endgame items that were insanely strong. Unfortunate that its Dark Artist weapon was underwhelming, too short range for my liking. If the sprite was improved and the Dark Artist weapon was buffed, it would be an easy 10 out of 10. However, I put it on 9.75 out of 10. Yes, I'm allowed to cheat scores. Now, on to the next boss to rate, Frostron. Very, very great boss. Great aesthetic, if a little unoriginal since it's just an icy skeletron, but man, this fight is a blast. Very quick attacks that had me on my toes focusing to dodge. Made all the upgrades I had feel worth it. It exemplified the speed of this mod, and almost felt like a speed test to really question if you've been keeping up with the speed upgrades. Very enjoyable fight, needs unique boss music. As for loot, it's not what he drops, but what drops as a result of his defeat. The upgraded Frost Moon was a very welcome surprise, although leaving behind the Pumpkin Moon felt weird. The ice pick that could be made allowed you to mine Void Stun, and the Frost Moon gear upgrades were very strong. I didn't use them until after I finished the playthrough because I was too lazy to grind the materials I needed for the Heart of Frost and would have rather used the Cosmic Wrath. Definitely a 10 out of 10 fight. Very great boss. And now for the final boss, Keozarith, the Gatekeeper of Chaos. This boss was wild, insanely fast to the point where I was caught off guard quite a bit, but it's a chaotic fight that definitely fits the final boss. It really feels like a final boss, really testing to see if you're ready or not. In my first fight, I was clapped because I definitely wasn't ready. Taking the time to prepare rewarded me with his defeat. His moves are very fast paced and hit hard, so it was rewarding to dodge. His rapid charge attacks almost felt like a dance, with me circling and dashing to dodge. I also did like the callback to the Overseer, with the minions it spawns looking like the other boss. The boss music was also good, but not as good as Primordius' of Voids. Still good, just not as good. Where does this boss fall flat? It's loot. It drops bars, but they can only be turned into his weapons, which you can just get by killing him. The weapons also don't feel interesting enough to use over the cosmic weapons. The only flaw in an otherwise perfect boss, so it unfortunately gets a 9.5 out of 10. So close, but yet so far. Overall, this is a very great mod. I thoroughly enjoyed playing through this mod, and I'm looking very much forward to any future updates. I give it an easy 9 out of 10. It has the potential to become a 10 out of 10 with a few changes and additions to fluff up pre-hard mode and the post-Moonlord stage. I'll keep an eye on this mod for when it gets updated and add it back to my mod queue. Speaking of mod playthrough queue, what's up next? Up next, premiering on the 24th of November, as I need a break, is the first episode of the Elements Awoken mod, another mod I've seen low coverage of. I'm excited to show you all what I've been recording for it. Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. I've gone from only 5 followers to almost 40 at the time of starting the script, and over 700 combined views on the Anarchist mod playthrough alone. I very much appreciate support. Stay tuned for the next video. BladeBurger out.